Greetings, Rebel fans. My name is Jason Kelly, and this is the Let's Run podcast. I want to welcome you all to the show tonight. Not expecting a big audience tonight. Lots going on right now. I am in finals here at the law school, finishing out my UNLV time as a student, my time at UNLV as a student, I should say. There's currently a Golden Knights game going on right now, I think. Yep. So the Golden Knights are currently in between periods, between the second and third periods. The Knights are up 2-1 on the Wild in a crazy series where the Knights have a chance to close it out. So I'm not expecting a big audience tonight. If you're a Knights fan and you want to watch that game, come back later. Check out the Let's Run podcast after that game is finished. This podcast is available. It will be up on Apple and Spotify. Also on my Twitter account, you can just click on it and play it right there. So no pressure to watch right now. I just wanted to get a podcast up this week because I do have the goal throughout the off season to have at least a once weekly podcast, keeping you guys up to date with current news and what's going on with the Runnin' Rebels and the UNLV football program. Rebel Diehard says, it's the piano man. Yeah, I do play the piano. I appreciate it. Yes, and like Finzik says, it is on YouTube as well. So you can always catch the Let's Run podcast on my YouTube channel, where I post these concurrently. And so it's been it's been about a week since we had our epic live stream where we had 500 people on, which when you think about it, we're in the off season now. You're not going to get as much interest generally, just because the sports aren't going on and we're waiting for the games to start again. But we did get a few really interesting pieces of information. One kind of, we last week felt pretty confident about the job that Coach Pastner had done. I called it Pastner's masterpiece, putting together this recruiting class. And I think that we're pretty much done. I'm not expecting another big name to join the Runnin' Rebels in this offseason. I think we pretty much have our rotation. The team clearly needs another big man. There has been a push, and Pastner, despite having already a very good recruiting class, Pastner has not stopped on the recruiting trail. He is still trying to get people, still trying to get big men, still trying to fill out the roster, even still going after guys at the guard position. Prophet, I think the guy's name is Prophet Thomas or something like that. What was his name? AJ Smith. There's a kid named Prophet that the Rebels have had an interest in. A couple of high-level defensive guards. You are correct. Coach P has absolutely been cooking. And so, Coach Pastner isn't done, but I expect that we have reached the limit of what's going to be our roster next season. Yeah, that's true. And there are still good players out there in the transfer portal that haven't gotten valuable players that haven't gotten scooped up by other schools. Jaden Brewer was still the guy that I really wanted to join the Runnin' Rebels. I think with Kamani Hamilton joining, he's probably not in the cards. But there's a bunch of guys out there that are trying to hold out for NIL numbers. There's still negotiations going on. And so if I were Coach Pastner, and I think this is what he's going to do, I would add a big man. Doesn't have to be somebody that you're expecting to play 25 minutes a game. Somebody that you can bring in who has a little bit of experience. I would maybe look at the JUCO level, or a guy like we got Bear Cherry from the JUCO level, or a guy like Carl Jones who we got from the JUCO level. I just want a piece of depth, a break glass in case of emergency big man that can step in and not expect to play a ton initially, but if we need him, we can use him. And I think that those guys generally, you can get those guys for reasonable NIL packages. They're not too expensive, and there's a lot of them. So kind of target a guy. I'm sure there's a few options in the portal. The Rebels are still trying to go after guys like Baba Miller, who is an FAU transfer, 6'10", 6'11", moves the ball really well. And if Coach Pastner can pull something like that off, he absolutely should, because there's still room in this rotation for a big man who can play significant minutes. but I'm just not expecting the Rebels to get a guy that's really going to move the needle. Um, when I look at the roster next season, there's been a lot of speculation about what you envision to be the starting lineup. Um, the Miles Che versus Dre Gibbs Lawhorn question is a big one. Draven, I think is I still got to hear somebody else say his name because I feel like I'm the only person that's ever said his name. Draw. I called him Draw for a long time. But the Draw or the Dre, sorry, versus Miles Che for the starting point guard position is a big one. I expect one of those two dudes is going to start. The other one is going to be the sixth man and get significant minutes off the bench. And so, probably Dre is the guy that I would start from Illinois. I think he's too good of an athlete. I think he fits very well with the rest of the lineup, of the starting lineup that I have in my head. And Miles Che kind of seems like a Justin Hawkins coming off the bench type guy who's even a better shooter than Jayhawk, who can kind of run second units and still get significant, 25 minutes coming off the bench. I would start Dre, but I would say that Miles Che is probably the leader for the starting point guard position. At the shooting guard, I have said that I would go with Nas Cunningham. Nas, you look at him, he's 6'7". You may be tempted to think that he is a small forward. And you could kind of put him at the small forward, but I like Nas Cunningham and Howie Fleming playing the 2 and the 3 position. Howie Fleming has the size. He's 6'5", 6'6". He's a very good player who came on very strong at the end of last season. But you never know. Maybe that was kind of a flash in the pan type finish to last season that he had at Rio Grande Valley before transferring to UNLV. So if Howie isn't there, you could put Nas at the small forward. But what I would do is put Nas at the shooting guard and Howie at the wait, let me look. Okay. And Howie at the small forward position. From there, it's probably Kamani Hamilton at the power forward position. And finally, Dembele, sorry, not Dembele, Emmanuel Stephan at the 5. There's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made in that starting lineup. And a lot of people think maybe Dembele at the 4 and Stephan's at the 5. With Nas Cunningham coming off the bench. There's a bunch of different iterations of the starting lineup that you can come up with. And most of them make sense, to be honest with you. There's probably going to be some injuries, guys. It's just the way it goes. And so people that you think may be buried in the bench, like Al Green, probably, or even Isaac Williamson, the freshman point guard. Some of these guys might get a lot more time than you think. I would expect Kamani Hamilton, Ladji Dembele, Emmanuel Stephan all to get very heavy minutes in the front court, and I would expect Miles Che and Dre to get a lot of minutes at the 1. And then, there's just a lot of room in this rotation, and there's going to be injuries. There's probably going to be a guy who comes in and underperforms, but the roster looks good. Adding another big man who can come in, Emmanuel Stephan, if he gets hurt or if he gets into foul trouble, there's not a lot of depth behind him. In fact, there's zero depth behind him. I think you could put Ladji Dembele as the starting 5 if you had to. But again, Dembele probably is a little small. The stable. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you, man. Love Boise State. I do. I lived in Boise, so I'll always have a small, not even a small. I'll always have a big part of my heart that's in Boise. I love the Green Belt. I love downtown Boise. So grateful for Boise State. I'm gonna miss playing you guys in the new Mountain West. And you know how I feel about the Mountain West Pac-12 stuff. So enough said on that so far. But hopefully Pastner can fill out the roster. Again, just an excellent job. Sergeant Morhew, I will talk about Correa, who big losses for football. We did step in and replace them a little bit. So I do feel good about that linebacker that we got from UCLA, but I'll talk about that in just a minute. But very, very excited for that. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of the next topic that we're gonna. So, basketball. Oh, I needed to bring this up too. My apologies. I wanted to bring this up before I moved on to football. Just in case you and I've obviously posted this and it's been everywhere, but just in case you doubt, the oh, let's go down here so you don't see my chats. Just in case you guys wonder how good this transfer portal class that UNLV has gotten. Um, Evan Miyakawa, sorry, is one of the best analytics guys in all of college basketball. Right there with Ken Palm, right there with Bart Torvik. He did an evaluation for all of the mid-major transfer portal classes and had UNLV at number one in the country. UNLV's transfer portal class is outstanding. Obviously, it's going to be up to Coach Pastner to follow through with that and coach these guys. But you know, even third-party, non-biased sources are showing how good of a job that Coach Pastner has done. Especially Kamani Hamilton. He was a big prize, guys. He's such a big deal, and I couldn't be any happier. So let's talk about Charles Correa. And Dan Mullen tampering, and the unfortunate state of college athletics. So if you didn't see, Correa basically was our starting middle linebacker. I would say he was our starting middle linebacker. I know that Marcel McDuffie, one of our other linebackers, maybe could have slipped into that role, but Correa is a guy that had entered, if I'm not mistaken, had entered the transfer portal before, after Dan Mullen was hired, or before Dan Mullen was hired, but after Barry Odom left, and he ended up recommitting. Um, Need more football talk. UNLV is a football school now. Well, I'm doing that right now. We just finished basketball season. So as we transfer into football season, you're going to see basketball talk kind of go away, um, at least for the time being, and football talk really take center stage. So no problem, Brian. This will be primarily football basically for the next few months because there's not a ton else to say about basketball. But UNLV gets its one of its best starting defensive players poached. Tark has been gone for 30 plus years. Yeah, he has, but I still love UNLV basketball. It's the reason I started this show, and the football talk has been great. But I will always have a special place in my heart, Brian, for UNLV basketball. Although UNLV kind of is a football school now, and we'll see if Coach Pastner can throw his name in and make it a basketball school too, which I think he can. And so the spring transfer portal window was ending. UNLV didn't have a traditional spring game. There's been a lot of schools moving away from that model, and Coach Dan Mullen followed that wisely, in my opinion, because you feel like if you do a traditional spring game, you can invite just other schools to come in and poach your best players. But obviously, Barry Odom knew a lot about Correa. And he's not the only loss that we had, but I would say he's been the biggest loss that we've had in the spring portal. And UNLV hasn't been hit as hard as other schools have been in the spring portal window, simply because we already lost our coach, and so a lot of the guys that were going to leave UNLV football left UNLV football back in December, and so yes, I agree. I agree, Brian. Basketball has a long way to go, but Pastner's the right guy to do it, and I've come around on that, and I feel confident in Coach that he can do that. But you know, tampering. What tampering means is in college football, you as a coach are not allowed to talk to players who are not in the transfer portal. Otherwise, you are tampering with another team's player. The minute they're in the portal, um, you are allowed to contact them. However, you are allowed to contact agents or representatives or family members or people around there. And in most cases, I imagine that schools are just directly communicating with the players. And Dan Mullen, our football coach, said as much. Guys, it sucks. It sucks to have your players tampered with. It's not fun, but it's just a part of the game, Um, I wish that Barry Odom, who I still have a lot of respect for, um, I wish that he hadn't done that, but ultimately, Barry Odom is now no longer our friend. As a as the coach at Purdue and in the Big Ten, he's no longer our friend, and so it really sucks that that we're losing guys like Correa to Barry Odom. But ultimately, I still do not feel like any of the portal losses have been so bad that they're going to prevent UNLV from achieving what they're going to achieve next season. I don't think any of the portal losses have been to the point where I feel differently about UNLV football. If we lost our quarterbacks, I'd feel a little bit differently. If we lost some of our skill position players like Troy Omieri from Arizona State, I might feel a little bit differently. If we lost more of our offensive and defensive line, if Chief Borders, for example, entered the transfer portal, I could feel a little bit differently. But it's just the name of the game. Yes, it's tampering. Yes, every school in the country is doing it until we have some sort of congressional action establishing, an antitrust exemption and collective bargaining and these kinds of things. This Wild West environment just isn't going anywhere. And with the way that the House settlement lawsuit is going right now, I don't see this changing. And so it sucks. It's okay. Nothing UNLV football is lost is something to be worried about. Sergeant Moore, says, speaking of that week 2 against UCLA, Nico's name carries some weight. And if they beat a ranked Utah in week 1, we may have a ranked UCLA for week 2. Could be a high stakes game for us. Absolutely. This UCLA game, I think Utah is going to be pretty good next season. They got Devin Dampier from New Mexico, who's an excellent quarterback, and added him to Isaac Wilson in the quarterback room for Utah. Utah's defense is always excellent. I don't think Nico Iamaleava is a very good player, to be honest with you. I think he was kind of being held up by a good Tennessee football program. And so ultimately, I think that UCLA will not be ranked coming into that game against UNLV in the second week of the season. But because of who Nico is, and because of that story, and maybe because some people will relate the Nico situation with the Matthew Sluga situation, this UCLA game is Dan Mullen's opportunity to put his name out there, and to put UNLV football. I don't want to say back on the map because we were kind of on the map last year. We were a team that had a chance to make the college football playoff. So I shouldn't say kind of. We were on the map last year. Obviously, Boise State is the team that got that and deserved it. But this week 2 game is something that we need Dan Mullen to have his guys ready and not lose to Sam Houston in week 1. But this UCLA game there's going to be a bunch of people from Los Angeles at Allegiant Stadium. It's hard to overstate how big of a deal this week 2 game is going to be. And again, I'll talk about this all off season, but my biggest thing about the Dan Mullen era and what I see when I evaluate the roster as it is right now is I'm really worried about the defense. Losing Correa obviously, hurts, but I don't think that, with him, I would have felt much better about the defense. I think that there are structural issues and maybe a little bit of a lack of talent on the defensive side of the football, particularly in the secondary. If UNLV's defense is going to be good next season, it's going to be because they're going to attack the quarterback. They're going to be good in the pass rush, and they're going to be good at stopping the run. I think there's going to be serious, Correa or not, there's going to be serious issues with the UNLV secondary next season. And if any of the players for the UNLV secondary are listening to this, I would take that as a challenge. I see some issues there. I think UNLV is going to be a vulnerable team on defense. In fact, I would expect that UCLA week 2 game to be a high scoring affair. Yeah, I think so. If you don't know who Tamir Hickman Collins is, he's a player from Florida State who was visiting UNLV. I think that Dan Mullen put out a post saying that he, was still recruiting and he was at the restaurant on top of the Stratosphere. If you're not aware how UNLV recruiting goes, and Oregon was tampering with your players, stable, especially, CCC, Boise State's punter excellent punter too, ended up at Oregon. But if you're not aware how UNLV football recruiting works, generally what the school does is they bring in players for official visits. They put them up at the Virgin Hotel, which is the old Hard Rock Hotel. They give them a room there. It's right next to campus. So, and then they take them usually on helicopter rides, or they have a deal with the restaurant at the top of the Stratosphere, where players get to eat and look over the city at that restaurant, which is really fun to eat at, actually. And so that's kind of the UNL, and then they'll show them the facilities, and they'll meet with all the coaches, and that's generally what a UNLV recruiting weekend looks like. Dan Mullen tonight is hosting players at the top of the Stratosphere. So if we got Tamir Hickman Collins, I would expect the announcement to be this weekend. But it's going to kind of depend on Dan Mullen's timeline, and schools, guys will commit to schools for days before they're actually announced. So if you don't hear anything like tomorrow, don't be worried. If we're going to get him, we're going to get him, and the timing doesn't really matter that much. Um, and my apologies, Brian, to go back to this, but I totally agree that the proliferation of pro sports is a very good positive for UNLV sports. I think the Raiders coming to Las Vegas, besides giving us Allegiant Stadium to play as our home stadium, has been a huge boon. Not just because it brings more attention to that sport in the town, but because the Raiders are financially committed to helping annually UNLV football. And I think we'll see something similar with the NBA when Las Vegas gets its expansion team. Yes, I would rather. Yes, Jet Thomas is going to be great, Sergeant Morhew. I agree with that. Utah's going to be excellent next year. I think we're going to have a new attendance record in week 2. I agree. I think that we could get 50,000 people for that UCLA game, and that should absolutely be the goal of UNLV athletics, to get 50,000 plus people at Allegiant Stadium. They need to offer discounted deals. They need to open up the top of the arena. They need to help, maybe have events where you can help people with parking to get people close to the game. They need to get students out in mass. It's right at the beginning of the semester, and so students are going to be pretty excited to be on campus. Getting some of that 35,000, 40,000 student body from UNLV, as much of it as you can. I know that Coach Mullen will do events on UNLV's campus, like Coach Odom did, to try and get students out to that game in week 2. And yeah, UCLA fans are probably going to travel pretty heavily to Las Vegas. This is kind of the benefit. It's also a little bit of a drawback because sometimes it hurts your home court environment or your home field environment. But it's really easy to get to Vegas. There's flights from every major airport in America here. It's part of the reason why UNLV, I think, remains an attractive expansion candidate for other conferences. Even, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but even power conferences, there is a level of attractiveness just because of the geography and just because of UNLV. I shouldn't say UNLV, but just because of Las Vegas's place in the sports world as kind of the home of sports betting and the home of major kind of neutral third-party events in the sports world. It's a valuable place to have. And it's not a place you need UNLV to use, but it's having UNLV helps there. So I think we're going to see a ton of people from Los Angeles coming to this game. And I also think just because it's in Vegas, and because it's the very start of the college football season, I think you'll probably see some national people at this game, especially if UCLA beats Utah in week 1, which I guess we're going to have to root for, although I do have a soft spot for the Utah football program. I'm kind of a fan, to be honest with you, even though I am a BYU fan. I have some connections with Utah football, and I love that program. I love BYU a lot more, and obviously I love UNLV more than both of those programs, but it's all good. So, kind of closing out, looking at the rest of the Mountain West in terms of, I wanted to say that the Mountain West has done a better job, at least the top of the Mountain West, mostly Pac-12 schools, have done a better job of keeping talent in both football and basketball than I thought they would. The Mountain West has done a pretty good job of keeping a lot of its top talent, especially in basketball. Obviously, Donovan Dent, for New Mexico, went to UCLA to play as their point guard. And there were some losses in the football programs as well. But, I got to say that I respect the Mountain West as it enters its final year. to be a really respectable conference. I think the competition is going to be good. I think Colorado State's going to be a little bit better next year than they were last year. They were complete frauds last year. And they're going to be a better team, maybe a more legit team this upcoming season. Boise State's going to be excellent in both basketball and football. Utah State will be improved in football, but not crazy, and they're going to continue to be excellent in basketball. New Mexico should be very solid in basketball. Maybe they'll take a slight step back, but that's going to be a scary team to play, especially at the Pit. And their football program, I think, will be similar to what they were last season under Bronco Mendenhall. Reno is going to be absolute trash Cheeks McGee in both football and basketball next year, and I'm looking forward to watching Jeff Chode and Steve Alford absolutely fail. And looking at those programs suck. That's going to be as beautiful as it is every single season. So, it's happy times in the Mountain West. Obviously, with the upcoming changes, it's a little discouraging. This conference is going away, but appreciate what you have while you have it is kind of my closing thoughts tonight. I really like this conference. I really like what it has been. I've grown up with it ever since I became a sports fan. This has been the home of my favorite sports team, and so I'm gonna miss it. I think it's a fun conference. I love it, and sucks that it's going away. I do think that from the news that we've seen about the Mountain West Pac-12 situation. It does seem like this situation between the two conferences might need to be resolved by, is it June 1st? Because there's a deadline of Mountain West schools having to. I'm not saying it will be completely resolved by then, but there's a deadline of Mountain West schools having to notify the conference officially with a $5,000 fee. And in writing that they're leaving the conference, so there are some kind of artificial timelines that are going to be in place to try and accelerate the end of this conflict between the Mountain West and the Pac-12. Ultimately, the longer this conflict goes on, the worse it is for the Mountain West. The Mountain West has all of the motivation to get into an arbitration room and get a number about $100 million from the new Pac-12 to settle this dispute. The new Pac-12, they've won the Oregon State and Washington State attorneys and the Pac-12's attorneys, as well as the attorneys for these schools. They have a even if you don't think they have legally a great case, what they do have is an advantage of time. The Pac-12 is ordered to pay money to UNLV and Air Force and all the schools in the conference. And the longer this fight goes on, the worse it is for the Pac-12. Sorry, for the Mountain West, because I don't think that and this has been a point made by other people, I don't think that the schools in the new Mountain West love the idea of UNLV being given such a massive financial boon that will basically, I think UNLV, at least UNLV football, is going to be an absolute monster in this new Mountain West that's going to absolutely dominate it. I really do. And getting $25 million extra on top of everybody else is going to benefit UNLV in a way that it won't benefit Air Force because Air Force can't use the transfer portal, et cetera, those kinds of things. So it's all kind of up in the air still. I'm still hoping that UNLV gets off the sinking ship and joins the Pac-12. And I think that's the best. I think that's the best case, result for all of the parties involved. I think that UNLV joining the Pac-12, the Pac-12, and the Mountain West negotiating a new settlement, and basically instead of paying UNLV and Air Force all this money, paying all the schools in the new Mountain West a reasonable settlement amount to kind of bring that conference forward, as opposed to playing favorites like they are right now. I think that kind of just sets bad things up for the future. A couple other questions here. Can Nico throw the ball? He can probably throw the ball, Brian, better than Alex Orji. So I guess we'll see. He might be better at throwing the ball than either of UNLV's quarterbacks. Anthony Calandria, I don't find, when I look at his tape, I don't see him to be a super accurate quarterback, but I'm looking forward to that matchup for sure. UCLA fans traveled well several years ago when they played UNLV at Sam Boyd. Yeah, UCLA's football fandom is a little odd because they play in the Rose Bowl. That's a tough stadium to get to. That's an expensive place to go watch football. And so I do expect there to be a good amount of UCLA fans at the UNLV UCLA game, regardless of how good UCLA is, and especially because of this Nico Iamaleava situation. The Stable asks, who is the starting quarterback for UNLV this season? I maintain that it's Anthony Calandria, the transfer in from Virginia, who started 2 years at the University of Virginia. He is kind of a Johnny Manziel type quarterback, really good in the pocket, has decent legs, really a backyard football type guy, who's got a good arm, not a great arm, but a good arm. Think like maybe a poor man Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, not a good NFL quarterback, but was a very good college quarterback. Um, I think that's who's going to start. I think that Alex Orji will be used kind of more in goal line situations, and especially if Anthony Calandria struggles at all, if UNLV loses a couple of games, I could see Alex Orji taking his starting spot. But my pick for right now is Anthony Calandria. Luckily, we know who's starting at Boise, Mad Dog. Great quarterback, great player. In fact, the main reason I think UNLV lost both of those games to Boise State was because of how good Maddox Madsen was. And obviously, the Ashton Genty thing goes without saying, but um, I think that Calandria will be our starter. So I'm gonna end the show here, guys. This was kind of most of our normal viewers again are watching the Golden Knights right now, which I guess I should check the score of that. Looks like we're in period 3. The Knights are up 2-1 with about 8 minutes to go. So lots of interesting things going on, guys. I want to thank you for checking out the show tonight. Thanks for kind of a different audience than we usually have. People participating that usually don't. I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to this summer. Again, I'm going to be starting my study for the bar pretty soon here, so lots going on. But I appreciate you guys, and have a wonderful night. And let's run, Rebels! Woo! Peace out, guys.